Okay, we are being taped now.
Perfect.
5, 4, 3, 2. Welcome to episode number 4 of the Sword Experience Hollywood podcast with myself, Adrian Paul, and David Bethke. David, how's it been going this week with you?
Oh, not too bad. Still, locked away, but making do with it, of course.
Are you exercising?
Yeah, I am. I'm going on my, government-approved quarantine walks, but I also have a stationary bike at home, and I'm doing everything to just, stretch and stay flexible because, sitting in an office chair can be stressful on both the body and the mind at the same time. So, it's giving me time to exercise during the day, which is great. What about you?
Well, I've got a new baby, so obviously having a new baby and two kids that you have to try and get them to do their homeschooling now. Mm-hmm. And run a company and a charity and
right.
and while the baby's going, I want some food. Mm-hmm. You're locked up in the same situation. It kind of gets to you. So you need an outlet. And I try to structure things. I think kids these days really need structure.
Right.
And so structuring that, I think the key thing is to make sure you have a schedule for them.
Mm-hmm.
And,
exactly.
So I think that's really very, very important. That's what we try to do. My wife actually takes a board and writes down and says, "Good morning, kids. This morning, can you empty the dishwasher, get yourself some breakfast, dress yourselves up, go and read a book, and start doing your homework." So that's a good hour and a half, 2 hours of that while we try and catch up on the sleep that the baby's not been giving us during the night.
Yeah. So it's like exercise and you don't even know you're doing it. Oh, you do know you're doing it, but it's all, part of your day as well. Yeah,
it's very important to do that. It's like anything. I think anything during this this period, we look at things many times as being, this is a problem. There's going to be a lot of people losing jobs. There's going to be people out of work. They can't do certain things they wanted to do. There's a lot of stuff, but there is always a light at the end of the tunnel because problems are only opportunities in disguise. That's what I believe.
Yeah.
And I think that's really something you have to look at rather than looking at going, oh my God, this is happening. There's so many times in my life and in my career that I've turned around and I've looked at it and go, I don't know what I'm going to do right now. This has just happened and this is the end of it. But if I'd constantly done that, I think I wouldn't have been succeeding because I would have been beaten by what had happened to me rather than saying, okay, I've got to restructure, I've got to do something different, and now we can change and possibly go in this direction. And just don't let it beat you down. It just builds your character.
It's about adaptability.
Yeah, it is. It is about adaptability. And we created this podcast because we are adapting. It was one of the reasons. It wasn't the only reason, but it was one of the reasons why the Sword Experience went online because we're an event-based company. And a lot of the time, while I don't work in films and TV, I like to be able to share what I've learned and have some fun with and visit places I might not have done before. I've visited some amazing castles, some in Ireland, in England, in Germany, in France. Some places that are stunning that I would normally have to go there and just go there on my own. But why not go there and have fun while I'm doing it and do a tour in a real place? So it's kind of fun to do.
Beats doing it in the backyard all the time.
Yeah,
might go to a castle or something like that.
Well, many people actually. I've had a variety of people come through the Sword Experience itself, and those people have been people that have come from cosplay or martial artists or just fans. It's the variety goes from 14 years old to 70 years old. Purely because anybody can do it, and the idea is it's a learning curve, and everybody works at the same pace. And those that have a little bit more experience will find things a little easier, and they get a little bit more to do. And those that don't, they will work on what they have to work on. And as long as they all get special attention, then I think it gives everybody something to look forward to. It's a different thing than anybody else has really done, and I think that's really do something new. Do something you've not done before. So go someplace that you've not experienced. Live a life that you might have only dreamt about, even if you do it for 6 days. So
Yeah, no, and they're great. They're great social events too, because I've been to several of them, and I love seeing people feeding off each other's energies. Like, it's a great way to meet new people, and it's a phenomenal, like, as I said, feeding off the energy, like people acting ways that they never thought they'd act just because that they're surrounded by people of such like-mindedness, even though they're all very different types of people.
Well, when you talk about community, the funny thing is, our guest today, Mark Mikita, who is, a very accomplished martial artist, and who I first met doing the Highlander convention 3 years ago, 2016, I believe it was.
Okay.
2017, I can't remember right now. Mark met his current wife at the Sword Experience. They got met there, and that's the second marriage I've heard of from the Sword Experience. So you never know, guys.
Exactly.
You might end up seeing the person you want to spend the rest of your life with.
Right.
But if you
wasn't our intention, we didn't set that up. That was like totally unnatural. It happened. Like, it's we're making connections here. It's awesome. I like hearing that story. Those stories.
But the thing is, if somebody once said it's like if you want to achieve something, if you're not at the roulette table and not spinning the wheel, you're not going to be able to. Nothing's going to happen. So get up and do something. And it doesn't mean the Sword Experience. All we want to tell people is go out and do something with your life. Explore things, do something a little bit different. That's absolutely fine, So So Mark was a very accomplished. I want to talk a little bit about Mark. He was an interesting thing when he has a school called Fightology.com. If you want to look it up online, it's called Fightology.com. And when you'll see all the art that is on the walls. He painted all the art in his studio, from swords to people with swords, different types of angulations. It's a beautiful piece of art. And he said, in his you'll hear in the interview, he has two brothers who also do artists, but he also comes from a very creative side. I mean, he went to study actually technical and scientific illustration and product design, and part of his training involved going to medical school to stand on the opposite side of the dissection table.
Okay.
With a drawing pad, so he was looking at woozy green-faced medical students carved up as cadavers. So, I mean,
once again, different walks of life. Last week we had a police officer. This year we got someone from medical school. You just never know where these people are going to be coming from.
Yeah, I know. It's Mark actually, as you'll hear, grew up on military bases, so he wasn't quite sure. He always says that most of his passion came from his father, which I think is. It's great that he has had that connection with him, who was a World War II combat veteran and fought in the Philippines. Right. And, personally witnessed many of the atrocities committed by the Japanese against the Filipino people. I actually went to the Philippines and looked at what they call the Bataan March, where I think like 13,000 men just literally were forced marched in the massive heat, and they just died on the side of the road. So it was a very, difficult thing for combat vets, which obviously who dealt with post-traumatic stress disorder. And he spent many years working with these men who were deeply wounded, and it gave him an understanding of power and compassion, the true meaning of brotherhood among warriors. And I think that kind of started it for him. And he wanted to do the Filipino martial arts, because that, he said to me, that's when I found it, that I saw what it was. It was like me doing acting. That day I remember I was in that studio and I saw this and I went, this is what I want to do. And the same thing with martial arts for me. This is what I want to study.
Right. Yeah. No, it's great when, you find something and it just finally clicks for you. Not even finally. It's just like clicks immediately. It's like, boom, that's it. That's exactly what I want to do.
Right. I mean, the great thing about Mark is I think that he understands his students, and he considers himself the senior most student in his school. And I totally understand that, because when I've been teaching the Sword Experience classes, I've learned so much more teaching people than I did actually just being a participant.
Right.
Because you kind of see things that people do, and you then have to realize how to communicate something with somebody. So you're really learning as you teach. I think he's really looked at that. And he continues, obviously, his continuing teaching. I mean, he was actually, in 1993, he was honored to receive Grandmaster credentials in the Filipino martial arts, but he rejects these titles. And I know Mark, he kind of like, no, I don't want to do that. But he just prefers that his students simply address him as guru, which is the Filipino word for teacher. So I think, he's worked with a lot of people. He's done a lot of different people that have been in movies, some very, very famous ones, Benicio Del Toro, Amell from Arrow, Dolph Lundgren, Steven Seagal. So there's a lot of people, and myself, because I trained a little bit with him, not long, but we worked together more on the sword experience stuff, and he's worked with me twice, actually 3 times now, okay, 3 or 4 times now, with the sword experience on the academy events and one of the convention events, which is where he met his wife. And the thing I found was, we gradually found a very quick way of working together, and he has an eye that I can learn from as well at the same time. So I respect him a lot in the way he teaches. So it was with great honor that I actually worked with him. So I think now I've actually given him such a huge credit. I can't even give him any more now, and he's probably listening to this podcast going, oh, thank you so much, or not. Let's listen to the interview I did with Mark, and we'll come back, and we're going to start talking The Walking Dead right after the interview with Mark. Mark, hi. How are you doing?
Hey, Aiden. Good to hear you.
Are you locked in like the rest of us?
Yeah, bolted to the foundation of my house like everybody else. Yeah.
Yes, but not your training facility, right?
Well, the school is closed to the students, but I'm paying for it, so I go there every day and practice anyway. So. Well,
at least it's an expensive practice for you to have, isn't it?
Well, it's since all the gyms are closed, as it were, I have lots of fitness gear there as well, so it allows me to do both my practice and my physical workout. So. Right. So that's a good thing.
But I also know you do some things online as well at the moment, don't you?
Well, in lieu of being able to teach my group classes, we started right away, almost immediately upon being imprisoned in our homes, doing basically video conferencing classes. So everybody meets at the same time we would normally have class, and we're all on our little screens looking at each other, and we're spending this time, rather than lamenting the fact that we can't physically practice, we're spending this time recovering from whatever injuries we've incurred over the years and focusing on the intellectual elements of the art and getting that strong. So, a stumbling block into a stepping stone.
I've noticed actually not training as much. I'm actually not as much in pain.
Yeah.
It's not physical pain, it's bone pain. That's the difference.
Yeah. Well, when you focus on it all the time, you start to think that just a day or two of rest is rest. But when you've been doing it for decades, sometimes you need a month.
Yeah.
And, so I'm taking this time. I'm certainly practicing every day, but I'm not trying to brutalize myself. I'm giving my joints and my ligaments and all that opportunity to really fully recover. So.
Well, I think it's a good tip for any type of physical activity that you do.
Sure.
Repetition, sometimes you need to change the muscle groups that function that way. Tell me, for those people that don't know about your life story, I'm somewhat familiar with it. Where did you start your martial art training and why?
Well, where I started, it's hard to remember. We moved so much when I was a kid, but I started when I was a little kid because it was a classic story. I saw a martial arts demonstration, which for the late 60s was a pretty unusual event. So I was mesmerized. My dad had tried and failed to get me to do things like Little League and football and all that stuff, and I had absolutely no interest in those kind of activities. And all of a sudden, here's these guys trying to kill each other, and I thought, well, this is it. And so that was the day, and that was the beginning, and I've been training ever since. And it's funny because my parents went through what I think most parents went through, which is, well, this is the last couple of weeks, and then that'll be replaced by something else. But lo and behold, it did not pass, and my parents figured out, he really wants to do this seriously, so they were encouraging and supportive, and I studied with dozens of teachers over the years because we moved so much, and I look at that as a boon for my understanding, because I was not locked in one room with one teacher learning one point of view, so I was constantly changing my teachers and the arts that I studied, so it really gave me a very broad perspective.
What do you think is the important? I think I totally in agreement with you, because I've studied with a couple of different teachers here and there, and in acting and in martial arts, and I think I know what my point of view is. But what is your feeling about studying with different teachers, even though you might practice one particular style, which is what you teach? Is there any benefit to doing that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, probably if you go back to your scholastic education, you didn't have just one English teacher or just one math teacher, and sometimes one teacher's voice, while the information may be available, one teacher's voice, and I'm using air quotes, might not reach you as well as another teacher's.
Right.
And the way that they describe the art and illuminate the art might not exactly work for you. So having the opportunity to work with lots of different teachers, you may find that one teacher who says that one thing or expresses it in one certain way that really opens the art up for you. And so I think it's really almost not just valuable, but actually imperative for students who should be holding the reins of their own path rather than waiting for somebody else to lead them around by their nose ring. Mm-hmm. They should be looking for those kinds of opportunities. And it won't be always, I mean, I've had teachers who themselves were relatively narrowly skilled. They were good at one thing only, but their point of view and the way that they, again, illuminated that aspect for me actually illuminated so many other things and literally altered my path as I was moving through the art. So
I've been to your studio. What people don't also understand, which I think I'm going to mention now, is that you're an amazing artist as well, because you've actually painted all the art in your studio. Yeah. For those of you that haven't looked at Fightology.com, which we'll have on the blog now, the bottom of the blog here. But if you have a look at it, I mean, all that art in there was done by you. Is that something that you studied, or is it something you just decided to start doing?
Well, anybody who understands art in that particular vein, painting, drawing, etc., knows that you can go to art school, but if you didn't go there with the talent in the first place, you might be able to technically do some kinds of drawing, but you're not going to be able to really find that expression, as it were. So my brothers and I, strangely enough, not my sister, but my brothers and I were all gifted with an inborn artistic talent. In fact, I think my brothers actually got the lion's share of it because they were way more skilled and talented than I ever was. But I didn't actually. I went to some training, but I was already able to draw very well by the time I went to that training. So I really the training was more about learning technique than it was about learning how to draw.
Right. So tell me about your martial art journey in the sense of eskrima. I mean, you've done numerous teachers, as you mentioned to me before. You've studied a lot of people. And actually one of the things I actually liked watching you actually teach me as well, the fact of how movement is, if you can have as many techniques as you want, but if you're already ahead of the technique and you're not there, that technique doesn't work. Which I think is a very interesting concept, because you are now flowing with the other person's movement and you are ahead of the game.
Sure, you're focusing more on intention than on technique. Yeah.
Right.
So my journey, Filipino martial arts. My father fought in World War II. Landed on the island of Leyte in October of 1944, and after a lot of fighting with the initial landings, the folks who weren't trying to kill them, that came out of the jungle to lead them into the jungle in pursuit of the Japanese, were all Filipino escrimadores. They were all carrying bolos or machetes or whatever, and they were extraordinarily skilled with those weapons, as my father would witness dozens of times over the next year in his pursuit of the Japanese. So he didn't know what it was called. Nobody was standing around talking about Filipino martial arts or eskrima. They were a little bit distracted by the activity. So, but when I became crazy interested in martial arts as a young man, my dad started saying, well, we need to find you Filipino martial arts. We didn't know what it was called, but we went on a search, and it took a while. But he eventually found me a Filipino gunnery sergeant whose family had sort of practiced the art, which is a fairly typical thing in the Philippine martial arts. It's not so much a thing where you'll find a strip mall with a sign out front. It's more going to be in somebody's backyard or hidden away in a basement somewhere. So so I started that when I was still pretty young, and I have had a couple of dozen teachers in the Filipino martial arts since then. So, and I'm still seeking them out all the time. But fortunately, and I didn't realize this at the time, fortunately I had a great opportunity, as did most of my contemporaries, to study with a lot of guys who were actually in not only battle with the Japanese, but had intertribal skirmishes and fought Bolo versus Bolo and Chris and Barong versus Chris and Barong, which are the traditional old blades of the Philippine martial arts, and they were covered with scars to show for it. So having that kind of direct transmission from somebody who'd really done it in battle was gold, and that's pretty rare to find those kind of teachers these days. So
yeah, there's obviously there's thousands of islands in the Philippines, and some people call it Kali, some people call it Balintawak, some people call it Arnis. Yeah. Is there a very difference between those?
Well, the sort of generic umbrella names, if you will, are Eskrima, Arnis, and more recently Kali. Kali is more of an Americanized word, really. If you went back to the Philippines in the 70s and asked for a Kali school, basically nobody would have known what you were talking about. Right. But Eskrima and Arnis are the much more popular sort of overarching names. In fact, Arnis is the national sport of the Philippines. But every island, there are 7,641 islands by one recent count. So most of those islands will have at least one or two different dialects. So you're talking about hundreds of dialects. So the names of the arts are infinite. So it's both kind of wonderful because it does emphasize that uniqueness and individuality of the different methods. But it also becomes difficult when it comes to just plain old marketing. When you say Filipino martial arts, it's like, well, which one are you talking about? There's so many different ones. So, but I think Eskrima, which is derived from the Spanish esgrima, which is derived from the French escrime, which all of those words just mean fencing. And Arnis comes from harness the hand, or Arnis de mano, which just describes the outfit that they wore when they trained in front of the Spanish. So both of the terms are Spanish derivations. I think Eskrima is probably the most accurate simply because it just describes what the activity is, which is fencing, comes from the word defencing, which is just self-defense. So it's as simple as that.
Do you find the sword technique of the Filipinos similar to any other technique that you might have come across?
Well, it's actually, for the most part, the old methods which predate the Spanish and Portuguese coming to the Philippines in the 1520s. The old methods are closer to methods you might find in Venezuela and even in Africa, where it's more like machete-like type weapons, where there's really not a guard. It really can't be called swords per se, even though they're big old scary knives. That's exactly what they are, is big old scary knives. They're really not swords. A sword, in my way of looking at things, is defined by the guard. A broadsword or a rapier, they all have a guard, and you can use that guard very effectively. Minus that guard, your hand is in big trouble. So the old methods tend to look more like those relatively primitive methods that are guardless, as it were. Then, of course, the Spanish and Portuguese influence changed the art a lot. You obviously had the Spanish terminology came in. So we have espada y daga, for example, which is sword and dagger, or a longer weapon and a short weapon. It could be an axe and a dagger, a sword and a short stick. There's lots of different permutations. But the funny thing in the Filipino martial arts is to say that anything is purely Filipino. That's essentially a joke because the whole island is just a big smorgasbord.
Yes, so. Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about also, you and I have worked together a few times now on the sword experience, but...
Thank God I'm ever sick of it.
We'll get to that in a minute.
All right.
Listen, be careful because you met your wife through the sword.
That's true. Yeah.
So what was I going to ask you? The background you also have in the movies. You also trained some actors for different roles in movies as well, haven't you?
Yeah.
What was that like? And if you can mention anybody, that'd be great. But is there a difference between training somebody there or somebody that is just off the street? Is there any difference?
Definitely. Certainly, an actor will come to me more often than not, depending on the level of the project. They'll come to me with a script already written and a fight or many fights already kind of described in general, and then I've got to sort of fill in the blanks and give them the tools to not only do the physical action, but to make it come alive and make the emotion of that fight real. Most of the actors have not been in serious combat in their lives, so try to give them a kind of a core of a warrior so that they can actually sell that, which you understand from doing not just Highlander, but lots of different roles of that nature. So I don't have to focus so much on that when I'm teaching people straight off the street, because that just becomes an integral aspect of the art, and they're not really trying to do it for show. They're doing it for real. So a couple of the actors I've worked with, Benicio Del Toro, who's just terrific. He was like the most down-to-earth guy. You'd think he just came to fix the plumbing in your house. He was just relaxed and easygoing, but really professional and really, really sharp. So Dolph Lundgren, who's also a brilliant guy, great to hang out with. Who else? You, of course.
Me, of course.
Yeah, you, of course. A couple of actors who have done some television roles, a little bit less known. Even go back and did some stuff with like Peter Reckel and Days of Our Lives and some soap opera stuff. So I've been doing that for a long time. It's funny because I've never actually tried to do it. It's just something that has, I guess, because my reputation in Los Angeles, that I just get these errant phone calls every once in a while. Hey, can you work with so and so? And they send them over. So.
You also worked on Arrow as well, didn't you? For at the beginning?
I taught the actor, Stephen Amell. They sent him to me before they were shooting the pilot. And part of that came from the fact that one of the producers, and who was also a head of the Stunts Canada, was a student of mine when I was teaching up in Vancouver. And I'm well known with the stunt people up there for teaching Filipino martial arts. And they wanted to have that kind of insane weaponry stuff as part of the role. So so it was fun.
What do you and I have worked together. I mean, the sort of experience numbering system has kind of come from a target. You actually mentioned it to me. I thought, yes, and I then started developing it, and you kind of put your what's the advantage of having a numbering system from your point of view? I mean, I think you and I have both seen it. Its effects to the general public that we've been able to teach. But what's your feeling on it?
Well, it simplifies a couple of things right at the outset, which is we can now have a language that both you or I as the teacher speak in common with the student. So we're not having to demonstrate every single action that we make. Once we've gotten this numbering system and the attendant techniques all kind of organized in their head, now we can speak about it, we can communicate about it in a much quicker way. I can, for example, say, okay, I want you to come at me with a number 1, I'm going to defend it with a number 3 or whatever. And now those numbers become the action in our head. We have it sort of organized in our head as actions. So we're not always wasting essentially a lot of time re-demonstrating things over and over again. So it's valuable in that way.
Do you think it's valuable for actors as well to sort of learn these types of things, and stunt people? Do you think sometimes they just go ahead and say, because obviously when you're dealing with a specific style, if you're a stuntman or if you're an actor, you have to learn that style as well, don't you? I mean,
sure.
It's but angulations are pretty much the same. Doesn't matter whether you're using, you're dealing with Eskrimo, if you're dealing with broadsword or katana. If you're trying to cut somebody diagonally, that same cut is going to still apply.
Sure. The only thing that ever tends to arise in that is people competing with one another can get in the way of maintaining an effective communication system, because one guy who's trying to get the job will say that his numbering system is better than that other guy's numbering system, and now we've got that problem. So that tends to arise. That arises in Filipino martial arts, for example. There's pretty much every system I've ever studied, the numbering system was a little bit different. And it's really obvious in some of them that the only reason it's different is to be different than the guy down the street.
Yeah, right.
So that pettiness is, as much as we would like to think that we rise above it, it's still rampant in the martial arts. So.
Well, you said something at the beginning here, about learning from different teachers. I mean, is it difficult, do you think, if somebody learns one numbering system to go and learn another?
I think it's actually really valuable, especially because if they themselves aspire to be teachers, being able to cross-reference accurately between systems and show why this system has perhaps a better answer in this circumstance, this environment, whatever, than this other system, if they can do so accurately and be true to the system they're describing, that obviously is like a history teacher who has not just read the books but actually gone to the places and can tell you about the scent and the feel and the energy of the place and the people rather than just what he read in a book. Do you think that's something to do with how certain martial arts are perceived? The history behind them, the way the culture actually developed it. Is that still kind of taught in some places today, or do you think that's been lost? Yes and no. I think in the mixed martial arts world, the things that led to the development of whatever that art is, and anytime you look at a martial art and want to really understand it, you have to understand the people, you have to understand the culture, you have to understand their history, what the threats were that they were facing, et cetera, et cetera. The way that even their language and the way that they speak, if it's more scientifically accurate and precise, or if it's more flowery and metaphorical, that absolutely affects the way that the art develops and grows. So understanding where it comes from gives you a better understanding of how to fully express it. Whereas in the sport world, they basically discard all of those elements and just talk about the efficacy or lack of efficacy of any particular technique. And that's fine, but you lose the spirit and you lose the heart and you lose the connection to the past. So, yeah, agreed. Well, Mark, thank you for chatting with me for this moment while we're all sort of sitting in our homes trying to keep this virus away. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm sure we'll talk again. I'm sure you'll be coming to some more sword experiences and we'll work out again, because I actually enjoyed working with you. I think you're an amazing teacher, and I love working with you. It's great. And you did mention it. My wife and I did meet in the first sword experience I worked with you on. So kudos. and you know what? It's really funny because a lot of people. I remember I was running from one thing to another, and we were planning a meeting at 3:00 or whatever it was, and I turned up at like 3:30, 3:25 or something. Yeah. And that was a really good first introduction. But I think after that, the interesting thing is, I think a lot of the time when you work on anything, if you're a plumber, if you're an electrician, if you're a martial artist, sometimes you see eye to eye with the people that work similarly in the same type of job you do. Sure. I'm a martial artist, I'm an actor, but you're much more of a martial artist than I am. But I still think we had a good conversation, and I don't mean that literally. I mean that without actually having to say, okay, let's move from here to here to here. I think it was organically already in the movement. Oh, sure. And I think sometimes I'll use the analogy of working with Dolph Lundgren, because he's also a very skilled martial artist. It was very similar to that. When I first started working with him, there was that kind of feeling out period where we're kind of sizing each other up. But moments later, the common language that we had both grown up in and knew in our bones was so readily available to both of us that mostly we didn't have to talk when we worked techniques out or plotted out a scene with physical action, because that language was just our natural language. And it was the same when you and I started working together, that we didn't really have to. I mean, you'll recall that the first time that we went through choreography for the day, it took us like 5 minutes to go through. It did, yeah. And that's the beauty of it. Sometimes you don't actually have to tell anybody how to move. And I think one of the things you and I have talked about many times
while dealing with the sword experience numbering system or dealing with one of the events that we've worked on, is how, yes, there's the upper body, but actually the movement, the footwork, is an entirely separate conversation.
Sure.
And to actually incorporate that in the body as well, if you can move and the other person moves, then you have a dance. Then you have a conversation that you're doing when you're working together. So I think that was apparent as well, very much for me.
Absolutely, I agree.
Anyway, Mark, thank you so much. I'll let you know when this is posting, and have a safe day, and say hello to your lovely wife for me.
Very good. Have a great day, brother.
Take care. Thanks. All right, we'll be right back.
Ever want to do a sword fight from your favorite film? Now you can. Learn from the best as the sword experience travels to convention halls across America, to ancient aqueducts and to historical castles of kings and queens of Europe. Sword professionals, budding bladesmen, and those who want to feel like an action hero for a day are ready to take part in the sword experience challenges. Experiences that will leave you breathless, literally. Sign up now at swordxp.com, and just maybe you'll discover another you.
You see, I told you that we have kind of a symmetry to when we talk to each other. I mean, he's done this for a very long time. And he knows. He's trained in so many different. He's also, I mean, as you hear, he's a fight choreographer and a sought-after consultant for training for actors who are preparing for different types of action roles. So he understands that there is a difference between what we teach in a martial arts school and what we do at the sword experience. And this is one of the things I tell people. This is not. You have to be able to adapt. And you talked about adapting before. You've got to be able to adapt. Yes. Situation. And I've had many martial artists come in through the sword experience, and they've said to me, "Oh, I'm so used to being on the dojo floor and doing the technique this way, but all of a sudden I'm in a bar on an unlevel ground. It changes things. So you have to be able to adapt. And sometimes, as a martial artist, you're like, well, I do my move, and my cut goes from left to right, and that's how I do it. Well, if the guy's not there, which is something Mark teaches a lot, if you already preempt what that person is going to do, you have to adapt what you are going to do.
Right.
You can't keep doing it the same. You can't say, well, if I was doing it, my system says it does this. Well, if you're working on somebody that doesn't do that system, then your system's not going to work.
Exactly. No, you have to, once again, it's adaptability. It's like working, it's a conversation. It's, whatever this person does, I have to react appropriately.
Right, exactly. That's part of it. I think that's the interesting adaptability. Now, talking of that, we talked about also Walking Dead prior to the break, prior to listening to the interview with Mark. And Walking Dead was something I thought was an interesting. Obviously, they have a katana in there, but with Michonne, which is an interesting weapon. Again, they're cutting different people. We wanted to have a little bit of fun with it, so we went to Dallas on February 15th of 2020, and I was assisted by Eric Weiss, who has a lot of combat stage experience, and he's also affiliated with the Accademia de Leone. But then I also had Anthony Barnabeo come down as my second assistant, so I had two really good people helping me work on this fight. And we picked a location which was it was very cool. It was called the Heritage Village.
Okay.
And if you want to look at it, it's just Heritage Village in Dallas. And it's all the buildings are authentic. They've actually been brought in from different parts of the state. They're historic structures that have been moved there for the past 40 years. So with all these structures there, which are now obviously is just tourists, we were able to rent it out and create a Walking Dead village.
Okay.
That we could actually do. We had people dress up as the Walking Dead. where the spectators came and did makeup. They did. We had some walkers on The Walking Dead, and so it was kind of fun. It was a fun thing to do. Where even my daughter was in there. She ate a couple of people.
That's so great.
So, but The Walking Dead's an interesting show. I mean, I think it was one of my favorites at the time. Mm-hmm. I actually remember a producer friend of mine saying to me, this show's going to be coming out, and it really, you should watch it because it's going to really do it. And I said, well, what is it about? He said, zombies. I'm like, oh, gosh, zombies. Really? No. When I saw it, I was like, this could do pretty good.
Right.
And I was hooked. Well, I loved the show. I loved the portrayal of Rick Grimes by Andrew Lincoln. I met many of the cast there. Norman Reedus, who plays Daryl, and I've met Michael Cutlitz. I know Michael Rooker. Xander Berkeley has been to the Peace Fund events before. So we've had, and obviously Laurie Holden, who plays Andrea, actually was one of her first jobs she actually did was on Highlander. And she, I cast her. It was my very first directing job. I cast her as my love interest, and it was funny. I always remember this, and this is what we talked about this before. You just don't know where somebody's going to come in to the casting room and how it's going to look like, because you sometimes have an idea of what you want, but somebody comes in and does something different, and you kind of go, okay, that one. And Laurie came in. We were looking for somebody that had like this Scottish feel to them, maybe some, like reddish hair. And this, I remember David Abramowitz, the showrunner for Highlander, said, she's going to be like a mother and this type of feel. And Laurie walked in. She's a blonde, piercing blue eyes.
Right.
And, she came in and she gave this read. And I looked at her and I went, she's really interesting. I just could see it. And the producer said to me, is she right for it? I said, all we have to do is put a red wig on her. And I bet you, and sure enough, when she did it, it was really very cool to see. And obviously I was directing her too. It was just, but, and then to see her on The Walking Dead, I was like, oh my God, it's Laurie, it's fantastic. And I've since seen her since she's done that. So I know a lot of the cast, but the actual, you're very well aware of The Walking Dead, and so tell me your opinion on it.
Well, I watched seasons 1 through 3, and then I stopped for a while. And then my mom was visiting a couple of years ago, and she's like, "Can we watch?" She was into The Walking Dead from the very start, and she's like, "Can we watch an episode?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And it was the episode where Negan first made his appearance, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, and he just had such a gravitas to him, and like his character was just so like he was someone that you just hated, and I'm like, I'm back in. So I rewatched 1 through 3, and then I watched all the episodes before it, and then I caught up with Negan, and I've just been like absolutely hooked on it. Negan is like, he's gone through such an arc since his debut on The Walking Dead. I'm not, I won't say anything. But his character's just gone through such an arc on The Walking Dead, and the way they can write characters in that show just blows my mind. And they've been keeping it for 10 seasons now. It's crazy what they've done.
It really is. It's 10 seasons. I mean, the first season was 6 episodes. It was October 31st, 2010 that it came in, and then season 2 was 13, and then the next 3 seasons, actually the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they're all 16 episodes after that, because and now they're in the 16th episode of the 2020. I've not seen the last 2 years of the show.
Right.
I having young kids around, sometimes it's a little hard to see zombies, etc., walking around. Although, they want to be a zombie, they have no idea what it is.
Exactly.
But then when they're eating people, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's it's the fun of dragging your feet and groaning. That's probably what kids are into. Not so much the eating brains and everything like that.
What I found was interesting about when you create a genre such as The Walking Dead, the zombies, the
post-apocalyptic,
whatever you want to call them, the post-apocalyptic thing, which is our theme, as well as is Filipino martial arts in the past 2 weeks. There is a what's the word? There is a Bible or something you write that says they can do this.
Correct. Yeah.
And it's constantly being changed. If you look at these ones, the walkers here, they seem to have gotten weaker in a sense.
Yes.
Because they started to walk around. Before they were everywhere, and you couldn't get away from them, and it was much more dangerous that way. And then you take something like Z, is it Battleground Z with Brad Pitt, where they're literally running on each other, and they're just what is it?
World War Z.
World War Z. That's it. Where they're literally running and they're running on each other. It's a whole.
It's like a liquid almost.
Yeah, it was. It was scary as I was like, oh my goodness, that's just something. But this one was interesting because when they created it, they said, they originally were attracted to noise such as gunshots and different scents. They could do that. They could smell humans because they were alive. And when they brought it out, and this was the old adage of it, that when you got bitten, you turned into one of them, or if you got scratched, you would turn into one of the walkers. But then later on in the series, it was pretty early in the series, but they then said that all living humans carry the pathogen responsible for mutation, which is activated after the death of the pathogen's host. And the only way to permanently kill a walker is to damage his brain and destroy the body, cremating it.
Yeah,
but it was an interesting concept, and then you now have the Whisperers. Are they called the Whisperers?
They're the Whisperers, yes. Yeah,
which was another interesting thing, how humans adapted to a situation where they had walkers around them.
Yeah,
it was kind of interesting to see,
Yeah, well, going back to the zombies really quick, I was watching some scenes from the first few episodes, and it's like in the first few episodes, the zombies, their clothes are still done up really well. There's barely any signs of decay or anything like that. And then you fast forward to episodes today, and it's like the zombies are like barely recognizable as humans. They're like, their clothes are just tattered shreds at this point. It's like you can see the evolution of the years gone by based on the way that the zombies look, because they're wearing the same clothes that they were, 10 years ago or something like that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's... And the funny thing was, I remember years ago when I went to a convention, actually it was in Knoxville, the first time I did the Knoxville convention, I was extremely surprised that zombies had their own table. If you were a zombie on The Walking Dead, you went to sign autographs. I didn't quite understand that, but it was a phenomenon. I've met Norman. I remember meeting Norman actually it was Boston was the first time I met him at a big convention, and The Walking Dead had just been like maybe 2 seasons had been going. The line of people around Norman's table, it was enormous, and it's not stopped.
Right.
The fans love this show, as they should, because it's well written, and it really I think it goes towards that what we were talking about last week about the millennials who want that post-apocalyptic world, and what would it look like and what would happen. But this was a very interesting take on it.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, and the thing is, like, Norman, like, ever since Blade 2, I've been a fan of Norman Reedus. Like, he's just been such a charming individual. He's got that very grizzled look. But I've met him once or twice as well, and he's just like, one of the kindest individuals you ever meet, complete opposite of how he is on the show.
Well, Michael Rooker, for instance, is I know Michael. I remember I was doing a convention. It was the convention down. It was in Dallas. Sorry, not in Dallas. In Texas. It was one of the big ones. I can't remember which one it was, but I had Ernie Hudson sitting next to me. Ernie and I share the same agent, and all of a sudden, Michael Rooker turns up in a Ghostbusters outfit, and he tells him he's going to take him out. And it was just so funny. Great. And Michael has been like that, and I've met Michael several times. And he's also done, we used to have Celebs for Kids, pictures where you could actually download a photo from the celebrity of them doing a peace sign that the donation would go to the charity. And he actually graciously gave me one when we actually did a Salt Lake convention one time. But Michael is definitely a character. He's definitely a character. I love Michael. He's always awesome. Yeah. And then, of course, there's Scott Wilson, who played Herschel. Very nice man. Very, very nice. Just such a... He's like, well, I didn't know this was going to happen, and, I'm riding the wave, and it's great, and, but I think I really like Herschel's character. I just felt he was he was the father of them all.
Yes, he was, and it was a shocking moment when. Well, I won't say anything.
Oh,
but, yeah.
People haven't seen it, but yeah, it was such a terrible way that he ended his run on the show. You're like, no.
Yes, exactly.
Most shows do that. The good shows do that. They actually,
right.
And the action that they do now, the action that they're working on this particular show it's changed how we used to be able to do it, because you have all the special effects. You can do things so much quicker and easier now.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. And that's one thing that made I'm branching off the two directions. That's one thing that actually made Game of Thrones so shocking, is that a lot of the stuff looked incredibly realistic on that show. But then the other thing I liked about Game of Thrones is that very few characters on that show actually had plot armor, where it's you don't know who's going to die.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I think Walking Dead does a lot of the same thing, where it's just who knows what's going to happen? Don't fall in love with anybody, because you might not be seeing them in a couple episodes.
Well, the funny thing is, you talk about things happening out of nowhere. One of my favorite characters on there is Melissa McBride's character. I just love it, because she turns into, sorry, I didn't know that. And all of a sudden she turns around and she kills you.
Right.
You just don't know what to expect. But she was an actress from Atlanta. And she got this show, and all of a sudden it's an entirely different thing for her. One show, it just takes you somewhere else. But she was a theater-trained actress, and I think she's done her time, and it just doesn't mean that you're going to be able to just succeed if you don't do the work. You definitely have to do the work.
Yep. Yeah.
So, well, I think that's about as much time as we got this week. As we said, the Sword Experience went to Dallas on February 15th, did a Walking Dead episode because it's such an iconic show. We couldn't miss it. And we will continue to do shows like that on the Sword Experience events, the elite events that we will be doing once this crisis has abated slightly. There will be a lot more things that we will have to do to keep people germ-free. We will have already implemented certain rules that we will have to follow, but that won't stop us from having the fun that we need to have and creativity that we need to do. But in the meantime, the Sword Experience is here online with the training that we will be doing, the initial parts of training that you'll be able to do, so you can get up off your couch. And if you don't have a sword, you don't need a sword, you can use a ruler or something else that will help you understand how it works. Eventually, when we get into the real training, we have a Sword Experience trainer, which has specifically been designed and patented to help you do it in small spaces, so that you don't actually take out the living room china when you're swinging something around.
Exactly.
Looking at the TV.
Yeah.
But do you have anything else to add, David, before we break?
I just really, going off the trainer, I've gotten to work with the trainer a little bit. I really like it, and it's wonderful, and I can't wait for everyone to get their hands on it. So definitely just check us out on Patreon, and we look forward to training with you in the future.
So with that said, we will see you on the next episode of the Sword Experience Hollywood podcast. Until then, be safe, be well, and train hard.